Greetings, everyone. My name is Dave Fortson. I'm the COO at Regen Network Development. I'm based in Santa Barbara, California, and you are watching the Green Proofing Series, where we give sustainability professionals the ability to just share more about their stories of impact, the goals they've created, what they've been working on, and ideally a way that we can all share and learn from each other and what it means to develop authentic impact in the world. So super excited today to have MBA candidate Jake Brenner join us today. I'm going to go ahead and bring Jake in. All right. Jake, can you hear us?
Yes, can hear you. How about me?
Yeah, right on. Jake, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. And I'm just going to throw you right into the deep end.
Cool.
First, I just wanted to ask you is, of all the projects you've worked on in your career, what has been the most meaningful or impactful for you as a sustainability professional? Let's just get right into it.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I guess a little background on me. I just started my MBA at MIT Sloan a couple weeks ago, where I'm looking to kind of transition into working for a startup focused on biodiversity conservation or nature-based solutions. Prior to Sloan, I was at a large financial institution working with across their ESG teams. One project I'm particularly proud of is kind of the leading role I played in revamping their approach to environmental due diligence, specifically for oil and gas projects in the Amazon basin. Kind of as a black box in terms of data availability, especially on the biodiversity nature side. When you're looking at oil and gas, a lot more of the focus is on methane and emissions and things like that. I was able to find some data set suppliers kind of focusing on geospatial biodiversity data in the region, overlay that onto oil and gas well production data from various clients, and come up with a proprietary approach to kind of calculate and guesstimate what the biodiversity risk of prospective oil wells in the region would be, such that we could just to inform our risk assessment, our conversation with clients about which oil wells we really wanted to take a strong opinion on and which ones we were less controversial from a biodiversity perspective. I believe I've left the bank, but I believe they're still kind of using and refining this approach, and they're feeding it into their broader approach to the Amazon rainforest ecoregion as a whole across industries. But it was cool to be kind of one of the first movers there.
Amazing. Well, tell me a little bit more on that side of things. What's going to be the practical or the expected practical impact on the ground for that analysis and helping shape what that looks like? Does it mean, is it your ability to showcase or be able to analytically provide some type of benchmarks for biodiversity that will help shape the future of installations or how city shows up on the financing side? Like, can you pull on that just a little bit more on what happens on the ground?
Yeah, sure. So I was coming from risk within the bank. So the perspective was less so on the proactive and more so on the reactive, or not even on the reactive, but focusing on the potential worst cases in terms of oil well impacts on biodiversity, trying to identify those existing wells that are already contributing to the most ecological degradation, and two, comparing the operational strategies of our clients against these data sets and prospective oil well sites, trying to understand where high risk areas and ecoregions were within the broader Amazon basin, and then trying to convey that to the clients and any consultants they were working with, so that on the ground we could either implement better biodiversity management systems at wells that were to be constructed in these sensitive regions, or on the flip side, steer company strategy away from developing these specific wells and instead choose sites that have a lower ecological impact.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us a little peek into the work that you were doing at Citi. Why don't we rewind a little bit?
Sure.
You're a sustainability professional. You've already been deep in the space and, at one of the larger financial institutions in the world. What kicked off your journey? Like, what was the spark for you that really lit you up, that you wanted to spend the valuable hours in your life focused on impact? And then what kind of brought you, kind of the journey that brought you into, something as large as Citi, And yeah, just give us a little bit. Give us a snapshot on Jake and his journey into the space.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So I'm originally from Colorado. I did move to upstate New York as a teenager, but I still like to say I'm from Colorado because it more closely aligns with how I view myself. Always have been a big fan of the outdoors, big hiker. Went into undergrad studying ecology, wanting to do field research. Did field research on a project on lizard evolution in Patagonia. Great experience, but concluded that field research is not exactly my cup of tea. Did a stint with the UN and the World Bank trying to figure out whether international climate policy would be a better avenue for me to work on these topics and make an impact. Also a really valuable experience, but a little bit too much red tape and bureaucracy for me, which turns out I didn't actually avoid working at a financial institution. But I wanted to pivot to the private sectors, began to understand that, those that pull the levers within finance, those that control where capital is allocated across industries, across companies within the same industry, might be able to have more of an impact on how things happen on the ground and how biodiversity is conserved by some of these more extractive sectors than just academia or international climate policy alone. So yeah, that's what kind of brought me there. And, I'm back at Sloan, back in school now, trying to reconfigure that and thinking I'd like to move more towards the startup entrepreneurial space, or working with some sort of organization more on the front lines, pushing the needle forward in terms of operationalizing the financial viability of ecosystem conservation. But still a work in progress there. But that's
Fair
kind of
enough.
how I got to where I am. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure. I'm grateful that you're sticking with the space. We need all hands on deck, and clearly you've started out pretty early in your career and already had some significant accomplishments. I'm curious what your learnings were. Working at Citi and working, at this intersection of finance, traditional finance, climate finance, and on the ground impact. I think a lot of people probably don't understand the challenges that financial institutions face when it comes to mitigating risk, but also really being good actors for scaling climate solutions. I'm kind of curious, like what you learned, just like about where climate sits, at the boardroom level or at the employee level or at the consumer level in a large traditional finance operation. Is it something that is quite a powerful force in driving change and shifting how finance shows up in developing nations, let alone in developed nations? What do you feel like the posture is? Have you learned anything that is going to cause you to continue to evolve and shift how you show up in the space?
Yeah, good question. Definitely have learned a lot there. I think kind of on both sides of the coin. On one side, really did feel like sustainability and climate strategy was ingrained within corporate culture and strategy from the top down. I was there when the CEO announced the new city's initial net zero goal. I was there through some company reorgs that kind of tossed around where the sustainability function sat, but still maintained it and grew it. And even in conversations with senior leadership, the willingness to listen to some of the issues that the sustainability team would raise, the belief in the system, the belief in what we were talking about was far exceeded what I thought it would be when I took a role at a huge financial institution. On that end, just like the people working there within the sustainability space and more broadly believed in the mission and were open to hearing about it. Of course, in tandem with achieving their business objectives, which I think is unavoidable in any financial institution. And that kind of brings me to my second point, where it's kind of the learning curve for me to understand, what was practical and realistic to push for within the context of a large financial institution. Obviously, my personal beliefs on what should be financeable and what sectors and what industries are worthy of further scrutiny, sometimes would misalign with that of the corporate, but still learning that despite those disparities, there's still room where those two cultures can compromise and still achieve real world impact that does trickle down to the ground, to the smallholder, to the community. Was really cool to see, but something I'm still kind of working through now as I'm starting here at Sloan, trying to figure out how to remove those barriers from like corporate boardroom to individuals being affected is definitely still a work in progress as well.
Yeah, great. That's a interesting point, and I want to pull on just a tad in thinking about, I think we all recognize as professionals in the sustainability space that we need to plow something in the tune of $1 trillion+ into ecological repair, regeneration, conservation. Being able to protect, whether it's the lungs of the earth, at the Amazon level, but also being able to incentivize smallholder farmers and land stewards around the implementation of ecological practices that are proven to sequester carbon or protect biodiversity and rebuild communities. I'm curious, if you put some thought into, and again, being on the inside of traditional finance, but also being on the outside, again, what are some of the things that must be true in order to unlock the next $1 trillion? Like, what are the things that you feel like are barriers at the moment to unlock the capital required for relatively radical investments in ecological repair at scale? And what are some of the opportunities that we can reach for? Again, I feel like, given your experience, you were right in the belly of the beast, and you got to see kind of probably the best and worst, right? Of like what the constriction of institutional actors, but also their ability to move major capital in service to making investments in verified impact. Any thoughts on, just, you can keep it as high level or as granular as you want, what needs to be true in order to unlock the next trillion?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think a million possible viable answers here, all of which I'm sure have their own merits and will be a piece of the ultimate puzzle. But two that kind of quickly come to mind for me. One is kind of reframing the reason why some of these topics are entering these boardrooms in the first place. I think we may have touched on it before, but reputational risk, staying off tomorrow's headline, is still a dominant factor in the space, whether it's at the financial institution level or not. I don't think it's quite yet embedded in corporate strategy as anything other than reputational risk management, or maybe something glossy for your sustainability report. There still seems to be some barriers to fully integrating it within company strategy and recognizing the impacts that it's going to have on future financial and operational performance, which I think we all are aware of, but is something that has been clear throughout my career so far, that not everyone is on board for some of these initiatives being anything other than goodwill or risk mitigation. So that's one thought. The other thought is, better connectivity of large financial institutions to these true smallholder local levels. Obviously, at a large financial institution, most of the clients are also large corporates who you can work with and have them lead by example. But at the end of the day, if I'm working with a palm oil client in Indonesia, we've spruced up their biodiversity management plan, they're fully in compliance with international standards. If that palm oil client then sources some raw materials from 100, 1,000 different smallholders across rural Indonesia, the odds of those biodiversity management practices really trickling down to those smallholders, it's just the traceability isn't there, the data isn't there, the verification on our side isn't there. Just feels like a gap where you can fix the large corporates to industry leaders, but making sure that trickles down throughout the value chain is still an open question, especially in regions of the world where there's not enough resourcing yet to really help facilitate that information flow. So yeah, see that as another barrier to the 1 trillion as well.
Fair. So could you speak to a little bit about transparency and data integrity? It sounds like again, from your vantage point, you just pointed out that there are still, it feels like, gaps there. So you've got small land stewards that are potentially subject to requirements of a supply chain manager, and ultimately are subject to maybe interrelated standards around being able to comply with obligations in order to meet said standard. How do we plug that gap? Like, what does it look like, with, from sitting in a boardroom in New York City, and you've got a land steward, somewhere in South America, who, is probably under-resourced, and still asked to meet obligations for this boardroom, as an example. There's a huge, if you will, supply chain between that land steward and those corporate obligations. How do we fill those gaps? What does filling out a good, a right relationship with the land steward all the way up to that boardroom? Do you have any kind of thoughts on how to do that elegantly? That's not necessarily creating new burdens for an already overstressed land stewards, small land stewards, let alone create unwieldy obligations for the corporates that would just cause them to ignore or move on. Like, is there a space there that you think is ripe for innovation and development that we should be paying attention to?
Definitely. And I like how you said elegant, and we'll see how elegant things end up being, because I have my own. I think it inherently has to be not elegant at first until we can refine it and make it elegant. But yeah, I will say, coming from the financial institution perspective, we were continuously on the hunt for good, robust data sets that were up to date at the asset level, included necessary data points that we could use and condense for like a C-suite executive that isn't too familiar with species richness or some of these other granular biodiversity topics. But as you said, would also not increase any sort of stress or resource strain on the smallholders that we're trying to ultimately help with these programs. Yeah, so I think the opportunity falls within that gap where there's just a lack of sufficient data providers in the space. There's a lot of like new companies, startups who are coming up with different value propositions for how you measure asset level data, how you measure biodiversity data, how you overlay the two, how you update the two, whether it's like satellite based, like they're doing with cattle in Brazil, or whether it's on the ground data from smallholders feeding into a different data set, which they're doing in palm oil across Southeast Asia. I don't think one answer is better than the other, but I think more players need to be trying to figure out this question of how do you bridge that data gap? Because from the financial institution side, there's not resourcing to figure out that question ourselves. We're reliant on these emerging technology leaders to have the solution for us, pitch it to us, and then have that then be integrated into the environmental strategy at the bank. So yeah, I don't know if that's the clearest answer, but
that's okay.
I think
it's a real answer.
We just need more cooks in the kitchen. Yeah, more people getting involved in the space.
Can you speak to a little bit, as we get toward the close here, your next chapters? Obviously, you're an MBA candidate at MIT Sloan. Congratulations. Great to have you there. On the other side, where the space is, you touched on briefly, but what does it look like for Jake in the next chapter to show up as a professional? What are the systems that you want to disrupt, right? In service to more authentic, more transparent, and more scalable ecological repair solutions during the time of climate crisis?
Yeah. I wish I had the perfect answer for that question.
It's
and
okay.
I'm
not looking
grateful
for
I have.
perfect. Just tell me what you're feeling.
No, I'm grateful I have. I'm giving myself until the end of the semester at least to have that crystallized and ready for dissemination broadly. But I kind of referenced it before. I felt, and there's still a very viable argument for being in the more reactive side of sustainability. Kind of if you're part of a large corporate trying to trim off the fat, trying to respond to like the most pressing, the worst of the worst type of situation that arise. But I think in my career, I'd like to be more on the proactive side, working on some technology, some product that is really pushing the needle, that, you know, with time can develop a product that can be then trickled up to these large corporates and financial institutions and kind of change the strategy of these institutions. And yeah, I think in terms of like topical area, still sorting that out. Obviously, biodiversity and ecology is my focus area. I don't think any of that will change. I'm pretty interested in urban agriculture. That's a space I want to explore, and there's a lot of resources here at MIT for that. Just monetizing nature-based solutions and making it an actual investable product for investors other than your your like international finance corporations and philanthropic ventures, making it something that a Citigroup or a JP Morgan would want to invest in, more so for just their sustainability report, but also to add to their overall financial performance as well. So there's just a couple of ideas that I have bouncing around in my head, but on the day-to-day right now, I'm still figuring out how to get through my financial accounting course. So one step at a time here, but that's the plan right now.
That sounds great. Well, as we tie up here, I'd love to have you share two things. One, just a message for your fellow sustainability professionals. This is a stressful area, I think, for anyone working in the space. I mean, it's rewarding in a lot of ways, but also the burden of delivering verified impact, you know, all the way to the ground is not easy. And it feels like a lot of times we're really pushing a really heavy boulder uphill to show that we're getting results. So love for you to, you know, just, you know, share any kind of words of wisdom for your fellow sustainability professionals who are on the edge. And then just one thing that you're grateful for, you know, these days, in a time of climate crisis, we need lots of hopeful eco warriors. And I'd love to hear just, you know, what you're grateful for right now, and you know, take us out on a light note.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess one piece of advice, or this is also something I've been repeating for myself, but just to kind of stick with it. I think working in the ESG sustainability space, anyone who's been closer to it in the last 5-10 years knows how cyclical it's been. A lot of us experienced the high of the 2015 Paris Agreement and the low of the 2016 election, all the way back to, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act more recently, and then also what has shifted in US politics even more recently. So kind of just buckling down and knowing that the issues aren't going away, therefore our focus area shouldn't go away just because of kind of the insane pendulum effects that we're seeing, at least in the US. Yeah, and I guess similar to that, and on a more grateful note, and something that's kept me involved in the space and passionate about it, is that we're not alone. You know, I'm just starting to build that community here in Boston, but I had a very tight community of these eco warriors, as you say, in New York, people who are out across generations, across industries, across specific areas under the ESG umbrella. I think there's a ton of people still out there who are not giving up on devoting their life's career to these topics. And just because, you know, if you open the New York Times right now, it'll take you an hour to find a positive environmental
no kidding
article. That doesn't mean they're not still there. It doesn't mean they won't come back, hopefully in the near future. So that's what's keeping me going, I guess.
Wonderful. Well, Jake Brenner, MBA candidate, MIT Sloan, and a happy eco warrior. Thank you so much for your time today. Very grateful for your work and the way you show up in the world. And we'll find each other maybe if this recording is done before Climate Week. We'll see you at Climate Week, and if not,
yeah, sounds good.
We'll find you somewhere at some great sustainability conference and toast a glass to sustainability. So thanks again for your time.
Sounds good. Of course. Thank you.